It began with a single page, heavily redacted, freshly declassified, and stamped with the chilling header, Maxwell deposition, unsealed per judicial order. Jasmine Crockett had been requesting its release for months, buried beneath legal delays and bureaucratic silence. But now? It was in her hands. And she knew exactly what to do with it. The House Oversight Committee was half empty when she entered, the usual media faces already elsewhere. Ghislaine Maxwell wasn't physically present, her image loomed instead, projected on the wall from her prison deposition. Calm, composed. But Jasmine's eyes were locked not on the screen, on the footnotes. As the chair called roll, Jasmine quietly placed the page on her desk. 3 names. 1 date. And a location most Americans had never heard of, until now. Madam Chair, she said, voice calm but sharp enough to slice steel. Before we proceed with today's hearing on federal accountability, I'd like unanimous consent to enter into record a document that has now been released under federal order. There was a pause. A flicker of confusion. Then the clerk nodded. And just like that, Jasmine dropped it into history. I'm not entering this for drama, she continued. I'm entering it because it confirms what survivors have been trying to scream into locked courtrooms for years, that the network around Jeffrey Epstein didn't disappear with him. And that Ghislaine Maxwell didn't whisper to protect herself. She whispered because she knew who not to say out loud. A few reporters turned. One stood. Jasmine leaned in. Let me say their names. Since she wouldn't. One by one, she did. And in that moment, the whispers stopped being secrets. They became evidence. Within hours, the Capitol buzzed like a storm was forming, and Jasmine Crockett was at the center. Her reading of Maxwell's unsealed deposition didn't just raise eyebrows. It shattered ceilings. 3 names she'd spoken, 2 former cabinet members and 1 billionaire tech mogul, had never been publicly linked to Epstein's network. Until now. Cable news scrambled. Pundits fumbled for narrative. Jasmine? She sat quietly in her office, watching her words ripple through the media like a stone tossed in still water. But the calm didn't last. That night, Ghislaine Maxwell's legal team issued a rare public statement. The Congresswoman's interpretation of a sealed legal document is deeply irresponsible. Ms. Maxwell maintains her cooperation has been within the bounds of law and discretion. Jasmine didn't blink. Instead, she fired back with a thread on X. Let me be very clear, what I read was unsealed. What she didn't say under oath is the real scandal. By morning, one of the named individuals, a former Treasury Secretary, released a short video, visibly shaken, denying any association whatsoever with Epstein or Maxwell. But his eyes darted, voice cracked. The court of public opinion wasn't convinced. Inside her district office, Jasmine met with 2 survivors. Women who hadn't spoken to press in years. They didn't want fame. They wanted someone to believe them. Jasmine did. One of them slid a flash drive across the table. It's not admissible in court, she whispered, but it's real. Jasmine leaned forward. Tell me everything. As the file loaded on her laptop, grainy footage began to play. A name echoed in the background, one Jasmine hadn't read aloud. Yet, she closed the laptop slowly. Now she knew the 4th name. And this time, she wasn't just going to speak it. She was going to make sure the whole country heard it. The footage was old, blurry, but unmistakable. A private jet hangar, a woman sobbing. And a voice, cool, British, unmistakably Ghislaine, saying, he doesn't care who's watching. He never has. Jasmine paused the video. The 4th name hadn't yet been said, but the context screamed louder than a headline. And the date stamp on the bottom right corner made her heart lurch. March 2003, just days before Epstein's name first surfaced in sealed Florida court records. That evening, Jasmine sat on MSNBC with Chris Hayes. The topic was supposed to be redistricting. She steered the conversation, skillfully, without warning. There's a 4th name, she said. Hayes blinked. Another one from the Maxwell files? Yes. A name Maxwell deliberately left out in her deposition. But survivors didn't. You going to say it? Jasmine smiled. I'll say it on the record. In Congress. Where it belongs. The clip went viral before the segment even ended. Twitter turned into wildfire. #Name4 surged to the top trend within hours. Commentators speculated. Insiders panicked. Former officials began issuing proactive denials no one asked for. But in D.C., Jasmine was already preparing. She called a closed-door session of the House Oversight Subcommittee on Human Trafficking. Leaked texts from congressional aides revealed something chilling. The fourth name was not only powerful, it was currently in office. Security increased around her home. Anonymous messages began flooding her inbox. But Jasmine stayed calm, methodical, unmoved. In her notes, she scribbled one sentence. She hid the name for power. I'll reveal it for justice. Maxwell whispered to protect predators. Jasmine Crockett was about to speak for the prey. The day Jasmine entered the closed-door subcommittee hearing, there were more security guards than reporters. Cameras weren't allowed inside. Phones were banned. But what happened behind those heavy mahogany doors would ripple across the country like thunder. She opened with no theatrics, no drama. Just facts. The kind that make your stomach turn. The footage I received last week, she began, was not from a federal agency. It came from a survivor. A woman who never got a courtroom. Never got to testify. But she got a name. There was no protest. No interruption. Just silence. Jasmine pressed play. The video showed Ghislaine Maxwell leaning in close to a man's ear. His back was to the camera, but the voice that answered? It wasn't distorted. It wasn't deniable. It was a sitting U.S. Senator. Not a former one. Not a rumored associate. A man who'd walked the halls of power that morning. I know who you are, the girl in the background said. You gave me a fake name. But I know now. The room went cold. One staffer whispered, "That's," but never finished the sentence. Jasmine paused the video. I will not say his name in here. Not yet. But I will say this, if justice depends on survivors being silent and the powerful being protected, then this isn't a democracy. It's a hostage situation. Some members shifted in their seats. Others stared down at the table like they were hiding from history. But Jasmine looked up, straight ahead. Ghislaine Maxwell may have whispered in private. But I'm not her. And these survivors? They deserve a microphone. She closed her folder. And in doing so, opened a political firestorm the country wasn't ready for. By sunrise, leaks from the hearing dripped into headlines like gasoline on dry brush. Crockett points to sitting senator in Epstein network. Unseen footage played in closed session. D.C. on edge, Jasmine's next move could shatter the Hill. But Jasmine remained silent. Not out of fear, out of calculation. She knew the system wasn't built for the truth. It was built to bury it. If she dropped the senator's name too early, spin doctors would twist it into speculation, conspiracy, distraction. No, when she said it, it had to be airtight. And permanent. That afternoon, Jasmine met with federal prosecutors behind closed doors. She handed over the flash drive, a timeline, the names already on record, and her own sworn statement. This is bigger than headlines, she said. It's about what this building chooses to protect. Meanwhile, Ghislaine Maxwell's attorneys went into damage control, accusing Jasmine of re-traumatizing victims for political gain. The irony didn't go unnoticed. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered like vultures, chasing rumors of indictments. But Jasmine avoided the cameras. She wasn't chasing a moment. She was building a reckoning. That night, she returned home to a box on her doorstep. No return address. Inside, a folder. Inside the folder, flight logs. But these weren't the ones already public. These were detailed. Annotated. Personal notes scribbled in the margins. Circles around names that hadn't yet been said. At the bottom of the last page, one sentence in trembling handwriting. She made us memorize the names. In case one day, someone believed us. Jasmine sat still. Breathing slow. Then she picked up her phone. This wasn't just a fight anymore. This was war. Jasmine Crockett didn't sleep that night. The names on those flight logs weren't just familiar, they were foundational. A judge. A Fortune 50 CEO. A political donor with deep ties to both parties. But it was one name in particular that made her stomach tighten, the same senator whose voice echoed in that grainy hangar footage. The next morning, Jasmine walked into a scheduled ethics committee meeting like it was any other day. But in her leather folder wasn't the usual legislative brief, it was a certified copy of the flight logs, stamped, signed, and sealed. She didn't hand it to the clerk. She dropped it on the table like a gavel. "We're no longer discussing hypotheticals," she said, voice clear, unmoved. "This is evidence." One member tried to interrupt. "With respect, Congresswoman." "With respect," Jasmine cut in, "I didn't ask for your permission. I came for your response." C-SPAN's feed didn't show the panic behind the scenes. Staffers racing between chambers. Phones lighting up with PR drafts. The senator in question suddenly canceled all public appearances and left the city for family matters. But Jasmine wasn't done. She scheduled a press conference. Outside the Capitol, on the steps, not in a studio, not behind a podium. She wanted the people to see every blink, every pause, every word that couldn't be walked back. "I will say his name," she said. Gasps. Silence. "Because Ghislaine Maxwell whispered to protect him. And I speak to protect the children," she silenced. Then she said it. 3 syllables that stopped traffic in D.C. By sunset, the senator's official page had been taken offline. By midnight, subpoenas were drafted. The whispers were over. The name echoed across every screen in America: Senator Grant Halbridge. Conservative stalwart. Frequent cable news guest. Former prosecutor. His reputation had been bulletproof, until Jasmine spoke. She didn't flinch when reporters screamed questions. She didn't waver when congressional aides panicked behind her. She just stood there, fists clenched, voice steady. He was on the plane. He was on the island. And he was in the room, she said. Not allegedly. Not rumored. Documented. Within an hour, Halbridge's office issued a statement calling the claims wildly false and deeply defamatory. He blamed partisan theatrics and media vultures. But Jasmine wasn't done. The next day, she released scanned excerpts of the flight logs, his name circled 4 times. Same dates. Same initials as the girl from the video. She'd redacted all other survivors' names, but left one quote intact. "He said if I ever spoke, no one would believe a broken girl." Now they did. That same night, the Senate chamber was half empty. Halbridge's seat remained untouched. His nameplate was quietly removed before the cameras rolled. A procedural trick, temporary leave of absence. But to Jasmine, it was cowardice. In her next address, she said, "Silence is the language of the guilty. And if this body won't hold him accountable, the American people will." Then she did something no one expected: she introduced legislation. The Epstein Transparency Act, a sweeping bill to unseal all documents related to federal cases involving known sex trafficking rings, including those previously classified for security. She closed the speech with 5 words that went viral within minutes. By now, Jasmine's name was etched into the bloodstream of American news. Some called her reckless. Others hailed her as a once-in-a-generation truth-teller. But no one ignored her anymore. Cable panels turned into battlegrounds. On one side, allies demanding transparency, backing her bill, praising her resolve. On the other, those deflecting, invoking due process, questioning the footage, casting doubt on the logs. But they weren't challenging the facts, they were gasping for air. Jasmine wasn't moved. She walked into the Oversight Committee chamber with a mission. In her hand, newly authenticated documents, a sealed deposition from 2016, now released by court order due to her pressure. The document contained a name not of a politician, but a federal prosecutor, one who had previously declined to indict Epstein. Inside, there was a single phrase scribbled in the margins. "We were told, leave Halbridge alone." Jasmine read it aloud. Then she looked straight at the cameras. "Justice doesn't wear a red tie or a blue one," she said. "It's not partisan. But cover-ups sure are." Outside, a crowd had formed on the Capitol steps. Survivors. Advocates. Journalists. And for the first time, former insiders, flight staff, security, assistants, began speaking publicly. One by one, they backed up Jasmine's claims. They validated the logs. The timelines. The manipulation. And then, a bombshell, Ghislaine Maxwell's former attorney requested a private meeting. He offered Jasmine a second drive, encrypted. Inside, he claimed, were voice memos Maxwell had recorded on her phone, as leverage. "You release that," he said, "you don't just bring down a senator. You bring down a system." Jasmine leaned in. That's exactly the point. The encrypted drive was heavier than any document Jasmine had held, but not in weight. In implication. Her tech team cracked it within hours. What they found wasn't just damning, it was historical. Dozens of voice memos. Some casual. Some haunting. One, recorded in a whisper, was labeled Contingency, D.C. Dinner. March 18, 2014. Jasmine hit play. Maxwell's voice, low and controlled. He brought a girl who couldn't spell her name. Said it was a loyalty test. Said the others wouldn't intervene if they wanted to keep their seats. Then a laugh, deep, male, unmistakable. "Halbridge." Another voice chimed in. Jasmine's breath caught. A former cabinet official. Still revered. Still on book tours. Still given standing ovations. "I told you," Maxwell whispered in the recording. "They're not leaders. They're loyalists." That same night, Jasmine requested a second hearing, public. She dropped the clip, unedited, into the congressional record. There was no walking it back. News outlets lost control. Politicians scrambled. Subpoenas multiplied. The DOJ opened an inquiry into the former administration's handling of Epstein-related evidence. Meanwhile, Jasmine issued a direct challenge. Anyone named in these recordings can appear before Congress under oath. Or they can keep hiding behind lawyers. But if you stay silent, don't expect mercy from history. Halbridge's lawyers requested medical leave. Others vanished from the media overnight. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She flew to New York, stood outside the Metropolitan Detention Center, and held a press conference. Her words weren't just a warning. They were a promise. Maxwell's whispers tried to protect the powerful. But we're done whispering. Now, we testify. The final hearing was unlike anything Washington had seen in decades. Jasmine Crockett didn't just command the room, she turned it into a courtroom. No theatrics. No grandstanding. Just evidence, voices, and names. The room was packed, senators, staffers, journalists, survivors. Millions more watched live. Jasmine opened with no script. Just the drive in her hand and a truth the country had refused to face. We were told to forget. To move on. To let power define justice. But the survivors never forgot, and now neither will we. She played one last memo. Ghislaine's voice again. They said Jasmine was too loud. Too bold. That no one would believe her. I said, watch her. The room froze. Then Jasmine turned to the committee. I was never supposed to be in this room. Not with this skin, this voice, this truth. But I'm here. And I'm not leaving until every survivor is heard. The vote to open a full federal investigation passed unanimously. Halbridge resigned before sunset. Others followed. The media dubbed it the Crockett Reckoning. Survivors called it the first time someone listened. Jasmine left the chamber to roaring applause, but she didn't smile. She looked out at the crowd, the cameras, the history being rewritten, and simply said, "You were never crazy. You were never alone. And you were never wrong." The story didn't end there. It began again, with louder voices, fewer whispers, and one Congresswoman who proved truth wasn't just powerful. It was unstoppable. They told her to be quiet. They told her it was too dangerous. They told her no one would believe her. But Jasmine Crockett didn't just speak. She made the entire system listen. She stood in rooms built to silence women like her. She held the evidence no one dared to name. And when the whispers tried to hide behind power, she turned them into truth, broadcasted live for the world to see. This wasn't about politics. This wasn't about headlines. This was about justice. And justice had a voice. Jasmine Crockett made sure it was heard. If you felt that, share it. If you believed her, stand with her. Because truth doesn't whisper anymore. It roars.